Hello, welcome everyone to my talk. My name is Johannes Edmeyer. That's me on GitHub. I'm working for a company in Germany called Codecentric. We're a consulting company. And I'm currently the maintainer of the Spring Boot admin project, which is not done by Pivotal, despite the name. Sorry for that. It's a project from my company, and it's originated in a customer project, and we thought it would be good for everyone to have such a tool, and so we published it at open source. We don't do any money with it. It's just for the good. I'm going to talk about Spring Boot admin. I don't know, does anyone already use Spring Boot admin? A few, so quite a lot of people are new to it. First, I will show how to set up a Spring Boot admin server and what you can do with it for your applications. Then we'll have a look behind the scenes to make sure that no magic is involved. In the third section, we have look at what's in the recent release new. It has been published by me just a week ago. And we'll have a short look at what's coming up in the future. Okay. So that's what's up in the next 50 minutes. And I hope we have some time left for question and answers at the end. So we just jump into the code and set things up. So I hope this is going to work with the projector. Oh, okay. The easiest thing to do is to generate a project on start.spring.io. I guess most of the talks will start today on start.spring.io. And Josh Long was visiting our company a few months ago, and we both sat down, paired together, and hacked so that we can provide Spring Boot admin inside the initializer. So the easiest thing is, the Spring Boot admin is a web application, and I want to run it as a servlet application. We add the web dependency, and it's already the admin server, so the web dependency, and we have two options, the admin server and the admin client. The admin server is for the server having the nice UI, and the admin client is an option to include into your own Spring Boot apps, and the applications will register at the admin server so that they can be monitored, but we'll come later to that. And then we hit just generate. And I just need to reconfigure my display so I can see what I'm doing here. Oh no. Screw it. Okay, now I should see what I'm doing. As we've downloaded the zip file, we just need to extract it like this and open it in our favorite IDE. And we have added a single starter dependency for the admin server, which just pulls in two other dependencies, one for the UI, which just basically a web jar containing some static JavaScript and CSS files, and one jar which contains all the controllers, services, and so on for really running the admin server, and we have to do one tiny little step. We need to go into our application class and say enable admin server, and then we can just run our application. The enable admin server just pulls in some auto configuration from our Spring Boot admin server project. So it's just like an ordinary Spring application consisting of some REST controllers, some services, and some components. And now the application is up, and if we go on localhost 8080, we can see our application. That was easy. But we have no registered applications right here. So we can't currently interact with any application. I've done a slight preparation. I've downloaded the Spring Pet Clinic project. Maybe you know it. It's a sample project provided by the Pivotal guys for Spring Boot using standard techniques, JPA, some UI stuff using Thymeleaf and so on. It's an ordinary web application. And we just want to monitor that. And in order to do that, we have to include the Spring Boot admin starter client, version 2.0. This is the most recent version. And this was the other option in this Spring initializer. And this pulls in some auto configuration containing some components which can register the application at the server. And to make that happen, we just need to set a URL, the Spring Boot admin client URL, to point to the admin server. Host 8080. And as we want a good name in the list of application, we should also set the Spring application name, which is a common Spring property. Spring Boot admin picks it up and uses this as the name shown in the dashboard. So we say Pet Clinic. And one important thing the Pet Clinic example is already doing is this step here. We have to expose all actuator endpoints on HTTP. Spring Boot 1.5 does it by default, I think. Just adds security to it. And Spring Boot 2 doesn't expose it by default on HTTP, so we have to make this one step. And as Madhura told us, and we want to see a little bit more in our heads endpoints, we say show details always. Maybe you should use when authenticated. In my example now, I will do all stuff without any security added. It's we come to security a bit later. It's we haven't any pre set up stuff for security, nearly for the same reason as Spring Boot, so you have to set up the security yourself. But there are also options in the Spring Boot admin so that you nearly can do the security the way you like. And I think we can just run the application right here. Okay. Now we see our application running and visible in our Spring Boot admin. And I just make sure it's really running. Wrong port. Yeah, looks good. Okay. We have just a single application running with a single instance. We ourselves, our hugest installation using Spring Boot admin is about 50 services. One guy told me on Twitter he's running 180 services. Yeah, I think it's a quite huge installation. If you have one application running multiple instances, Spring Boot admin recognizes them by name and groups them together in this view, so you get an aggregated view and for all of the instances for the same application. Zoom a bit out. Okay. The views we have for the details are currently instance only. So if you go into the details view or some other view, it's currently per instance. But maybe in the future we will support some of the views or some actions aggregated on application level. Prior to the 2.0 release, Spring Boot admin only grouped the applications together in the UI, but now the with 2.0, the backend only also has a notion of an application, so that multiple instances belong together. If we have a look at the detailed view, we see the health indicators all shown up. Since we set the show details always, we see the full details, not a single up. And if you have some custom health indicators, they will also show up here. On the left-hand side, we see the things exposed by the info endpoint. And the Pet Clinic project has two nice little things. First of all, you see the current Git commit the application was used to build. And you see the information about the build. So when it was built, what's the name, the version it was built, group ID, artifact ID, and in order to achieve that, you need to add in your pom.xml the git commit plugin. Damn it. Wrong window. Here. That I think it's also mentioned in the Spring Boot reference guide. And for the build info, you need to activate the build info goal from the Spring Boot Maven plugin. But it's really easy. It's just this little step. The Pet Clinic also adds additional properties which are collected during build, and both plugins just adds a new property file to your jar during build time, which is picked up by the info endpoint. And we can do one more little trick. I think it's worth to mention. If we add a custom property beginning with info, and we could set it to like our documentation or whatever. It's just an attribute showing up in the info endpoint, but the Spring Boot admin server, when the application is right up, does render it as hyperlink, and that has come in very handy, as we tend to use the build job or the operations manual or the direct link to the source code. So if you're browsing through your application, you can jump right through, and the guys focusing more on operations also directly find where is this damn application located, and maybe can file direct an issue if you set a link to the issue tracker. Below, we aggregate some informations from the metrics endpoint provided by Micrometer. For example, about the JVM memory and garbage collection pauses, the uptime of the process. all the information here is directly fetched from the matrix endpoint, and it's not persisted anywhere. So if I switch the pages, the graph starts from new, and yeah. So if you want metrics recorded over time, I guess you should really do some time series database, set up Influx, Prometheus, whatever. But I guess Micrometer has a lot of options here, and it shouldn't be so hard to set up. But for a quick view, it's often nice to have this here. We have also a metrics endpoint to look at individual statistics from Micrometer, and you can even drill down to specific tags. But also here, not persistent. If you do more sophisticated stuff, you should really go full into metrics monitoring. One of the first the first views we did for Spring Boot admin was the environment endpoint. We used to work at a customer site where we just built a jar and wrote a config file, threw it all over the wall, and didn't know, did they pick up the right jar file? Did they mix up the config? So, and we had about 20 to 50 services, and we really had the need not to stare at blank JSON. So we one of the first things we wrote was the visualization for the environment endpoint, showing all active profiles and all configuration property sources. And the second one we wrote was the loggers endpoint. In the past times, we did this using Jolokia and JMX and only supported logback. But with, I think, Spring Boot 1.4 or 0.5, Spring Boot had an endpoint to reconfigure our log levels, and that's what we are using now. So you can, okay, the loggers with blanks in class names has problems, but you can reconfigure your loggers at runtime without the need to edit some configuration file, restart your application, or so on. And you even can reset what you've done so that the level is inherited. All changes made are lost if you restart your application. It's not persisted by the actuator endpoint. So it's just for, okay, what's going on there? Switch it on, look, okay, found it out, switch it off, and yeah, do whatever you found out. As we use our Spring Boot admin client, we pull in another dependency on Jolokia. Jolokia is a servlet just exposing JMX beans via HTTP. So if you're doing reactive applications, I guess it won't work for you using Webflux. But if you're doing good old Tomcat servlet applications, the JMX beans are exposed via HTTP, and this Spring Boot admin has a nice UI to work on the JMX beans, read the attribute. You can even edit them, or you can even invoke operations on JMX. And we have some customers who exposed their own JMX beans in order to do some things periodically. And now you have a nice UI to invoke it without hassling with the JConsole, JMX remote RMI stuff. It just works out of the box. Yeah, we have, I won't go into details for the REST views. We have a view to show the threads over time with details, or to show what HTTP traces were made. Yeah, Spring Boot by default only traces the last 100 requests, so maybe they are also not persisted. You need to increase the level if you want to see more. I guess 100 requests are, depending on your application, a very short time range. You can download a heap dump. Yeah, for one application, it's not so interesting, but we have a wallboard view, so every microservice gets displayed as a hexagon. As Dave Sire told us, hexagons are microservices. Yeah. We have one, there's one view I would like to mention. If we configure Spring Boot to write a log file, let's say target clinic.log, an endpoint called log file is activated, which allows you to download the log file, and we also provide a view for that in Spring Boot admin. Okay, now the application is offline, should be right online after the check. Okay. Didn't it work? There it is. Okay. And we have a nice log file view, which also does follow the log file. So if we just go to our pet clinic and trigger the arrow, we just see that we don't. Oh, we're not at the bottom. The log file will automatically be refreshed. Yeah, it's not very sophisticated. Maybe you have also some Elk Stack, Splunk, or whatever in place. Then you might not need it. But we also have lots of smaller customers who don't have such tools set up, and it's a nice and convenient way for the developers to access the log files. The downside is, if the application is not running, you can't access the log file. So if your application fails to start up, you maybe have to SSH into the machine and look for the log file on the machine. Okay, that's for setting things up. Okay. As alternative to our Spring Boot admin client, you can use Spring Cloud Discovery. So if you're already using Spring Cloud Discovery, there's no need to pull in our client. You can just add a discovery client to the admin server, and the admin server starts pulling off the applications from your service registry. And since there's also a service discovery client in Spring Cloud using just static config, you could also just do some static config, don't touch your applications, and have them shown up in the admin server. Downside is if you have a new application, you have to edit your config. And the bad news is, for the 2.0 release, I had to remove this feature from the release because Spring Cloud Finchley isn't released yet, and you can't publish to Maven Central with referring to snapshot releases or milestone releases. So we had to remove it for the 2.0 version. If you want to use it, you have to either wait for our 2.01 release, which will be short after Spring Cloud Finchley, which is currently scheduled for mid of June, I think. Or you just use one of our 2.0 snapshots, which have this feature included. Okay, now we're going to look behind the scene. I promise there's no magic involved, and it's just brain dead simple what's going on. If you have a client, it just starts regularly, I think by default, every 30 seconds to tell the admin server, I'm here, you can reach me at this location. And the admin server itself doesn't, by default, store the information about the registered application. So if the admin server gets restarted, the information is lost, but since the clients are just frequently telling, I'm here, the admin server just gets all the information it's need. It had before the restart. If an application gets registered, either by HTTP post or via service registry, the Spring Boot admin server starts polling the health endpoint and checks if it has a status 200 or 500. And we have had also the request to support a non-Spring Boot application just for health checking. So if you do a registration for your service yourself and just submit a health check URL. Spring Boot admin is also monitoring the health of these services. And yeah, you don't get the insights. But what you can do with 2.0, previously not, is that you can also submit a version in the metadata, and Spring Boot admin will also show the version for the non-boot applications. Okay, if a health check fails, the Spring Boot admin can send you notifications. We have plenty of options. All of them are pre-implemented, and you can just set up some properties, and you can use Slack, email, some other alerting options, and a notifier is just a simple interface. And if you have really custom needs, you also can implement your own. We'll come back to that later. And when we're browsing through the UI just makes HTTP calls to the Spring Boot admin server, and the admin server just forwards the request to all registered applications and queries the endpoints directly. So the Spring Boot admin itself stores no data, and also that's the reason why you have to expose your actuator endpoints on HTTP. If you have, I don't know, batch applications or some kind of message queue worker and want to monitor it with Spring Boot admin server, you currently have to embed a Tomcat and expose your endpoints as HTTP. There was a feature request to maybe support querying the endpoints via RMI JMX calls, but currently, yeah, it's not possible. And since everything is based on HTTP, we can just use our common tools for securing our application. So if you want to secure the admin server, you can pull in just Spring Security. You need to set up your own configuration, and you can choose whatever you like, from simple basic authentication over to JSON Web Token or OAuth 2 or just plain old session-based security. And depending on the solution or on whom to decide is the user allowed to access the endpoint or not, you maybe need to inject custom headers into the request made to your application, and we have a simple interface so you can inject additional headers. And primarily there are two options. One option is, okay, the Spring Boot admin is allowed to access any application and decides if the logged-in user can access the application or all of it, or you can, if you use, for example, OAuth 2, you can just forward the credentials to the client application, and the application itself can decide whether the user is allowed to access the endpoint or not. So it's you have to choose. But since setting up the centralized permission management in Spring Boot admin is a bit easier, most people tend to choose this option. The HTTP headers provider brings me to the topic of customization. This is a really simple example. If you just, the HTTP headers provider is a simple functional interface. You get passed in the instance, which is to be queried, and you can just set a custom header depending on metadata from the instance, for example, or some fixed thing or configuration or whatever. You're free. And if you want to do more sophisticated stuff, there is an instance exchange filter function interface you can extend or implement, and it allows you to totally do what you like with the request made to the application. It's like the exchange filter function from the web client, just it has the instance additionally. And this is also what we use internally to able to monitor Spring Boot 1.5 applications with the Spring Boot 2.0 admin. It just goes ahead, looks at the response. Aha, okay, it's the old content type. I need to transform the response a bit. Does it? And so you can also monitor Spring Boot 1.5 and older applications with the new Spring Boot admin. It's maybe you have not the full functionality because, for example, the metrics endpoint has really changed a lot, and we can't deal with it. So we can't transform the old metrics into the new format so that we can show reasonable stuff. And so metrics isn't there, but all other, most of the other endpoints like environment, Liquibase, Flyway, I haven't mentioned before, are in there and are working for Spring Boot 1.5 applications as well. Yeah, last but not least, you can also implement your own notifier. It's also a very simple functional interface. Spring Boot admin internally uses event sourcing. So every time something changes about an application, an event is fired, and the notifiers get to know about it and can decide, oh, should I log this event or should I do a REST call to my Slack API or whatever. One thing I forgot to mention about the instance exchange filter function, the reason why it's there is we had the request that one guy said, okay, changing log levels or interacting with JMX beans on in production can be dangerous. It can really have impact on performance or how the application behaves. I want to audit the things the developer does. We don't provide it out of the box, but you can implement an instance exchange filter function, and so you can have a centralized audit trace or audit log for the things that developers have done to your applications. Or what I would prefer is you do the auditing in the application itself, as if you expose the endpoints via HTTP, the log level could be changed not via Spring Boot admin, but via curl, and you won't get this in a centralized trace from Spring Boot admin, but in the application trace. But on the downside, you have to re-aggregate your audit logs somehow. Okay. Now, what else do we have with Spring Boot admin 2.0? We have support for Webflux applications, so we support both equally, servlet or reactive applications. We have with 2.0 out-of-the-box Cloud Foundry support. Spring Boot admin did work on Cloud Foundry in older versions before, but due to the fact how the router works, if you have multiple instances of the same applications, you needed to inject some other headers, you had to pull off from the environment, and the Spring Boot admin now contains an auto configuration which recognizes, you're running in Cloud Foundry and configures the stuff for you. The mail notification has been enhanced to use HTML templates, so you can do nice, shiny, colored mails. If something gone wrong, you can paint it all red. As mentioned, the version is looked up in the metadata for non-boot applications. We have an endpoint support for Spring Session. I didn't show it here. But if you have Spring Session on board and the sessions endpoint is enabled, you have a view for all active sessions in the Spring Boot admin, and you also can cancel a session. So if you want force logged out for some users, you can just hit a button and here's to relog in. Yeah, the wallboard view, I've shown it shortly, and we have support for Java 10. We can't build on Java 10 because we are using Lombok. It's not working, but we can run on Java 9 and 10 on the module path, as we provided a stable automatic module name, and we had to fix some issues with split package between the modules. Okay, what is about to expect next? I guess we have to do some bug fixing after the 2.0 release. It was a quite huge rewrite of the applications. The old UI was using Angular, now we are using Vue.js. Everything has been rewritten from scratch for the UI. And also the backend part has changed a lot as we added event sourcing and the notion of applications consisting of multiple instances. But the very first thing to expect next is the Spring Cloud Finch support when it's released. And an often requested feature is that people wanted to add their own custom views because they had written their own custom actuator endpoints. And with 1.5, there was some undocumented, unofficial way how to achieve that. It was possible, but very dirty a bit. That's the big thing I will work on next, is how to look up and how to figure out how you can add your own custom views without copying all the source code with what you have to do right now, copy all the UI code and build it yourselves. I really look for the multi-instances actions, for example, for setting log levels so that you don't have to go to every single instance and set the log level, but just one click and you set it for all instances of the application. And currently, what the notion of application in the backend allows us is currently you get a notification when a single instance is down, and the mail doesn't tell you, okay, there are 5 other instances running, everything is good. So we can add this information into the notifications and tell, okay, 1 of 5 applications is down, maybe you should have a look at it, or maybe you don't send a notification at all. So you can, we can look at the whole world, not just a single instance. Yeah, in general, we don't provide a pre-built Docker image or Java you can rightly execute straight away. We do publish the samples on Maven 2, but I'd suggest you not to use them because maybe you need really to think about security, how you want to solve this problem. And also, we have a lot of customizations options I'd really encourage you to use if something doesn't fit for you. And I would be glad if you maybe do a pull request on GitHub if you have done something nice and want to share. And also, I just shown 3 definite build extension points, but as we make heavy use of auto configuration, nearly every part of Spring Boot admin is exchangeable. So I consider it more a library, and it's like Spring Boot. If you provide your own implementation of our interface, we back off and choose the implementation you provided. Yeah, that's all I've got. I guess a bit early. Yeah, we have time for questions now, or if you have questions later, visit on Gitter or Stack Overflow or on our GitHub repo, or I will stick around a bit here. Yeah, we can have a chat, or just if you have a question right away.
For the Cloud Foundry support, you're going to have it as the marketplace, so you can put it straight away like you put the registry or the other one?
No, we don't provide Spring Boot admin in the marketplace. You need to set up your own project with a build pack, deploy it like a regular application. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, then thank you for listening.